Cable television, are we ready?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are ready.
Boy, I haven't heard your beautiful voice in like months.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you had a wonderful summer.
Wasn't long enough.
I see. Well, yes, sir. We're ready when you are.
Okay, give me like a second and then I'll be ready.
Okay.
I'm calling to order this hearing. This is a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chairman of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Tuesday, September 27th, 2022. The time is 11:22 in the morning. This hearing is being conducted virtually. It is being conducted virtually over the Zoom video conference platform. It is available for viewing on the council's website, www.dccouncil.gov, chairman's website, www.chairmanmendelson.com/live, on Council Channel 13, and the Office of Cable Television's website, which is entertainment.dc.gov. Subject of today's hearing is consideration of two bills. Bill 24-232, entitled the Student and Minor Access to Records and Transcripts Act of 2021. This legislation was introduced by Councilmember Henderson and co-introduced by a number of other council members on April 30th of 2021. The stated purpose of the bill is to help youth plan for life after high school and to ensure that they have ready access to documentation from district public schools, documentation needed to apply for jobs or post-secondary education programs. Currently, District of Columbia Public Schools and public charter schools require parental consent for students under the age of 18 to receive their transcript or for it to be sent to another school, college, or university. This can be challenging or an outright barrier for students who may be homeless, in foster care, or otherwise enduring strained relations with legal guardians who are unwilling to assist with the minor's career or education progress. The second bill that's the subject of this morning's hearing is Bill 24-665, entitled the Access to Advanced Placement Exams Amendment Act of 2022. This legislation was introduced by Councilmember Che and myself on February 16th of this year. The stated purpose of this bill is to provide access to advanced placement exams at District of Columbia Public Schools, testing sites for students participating in homeschool programs. Currently, students participating in a homeschool program have no simple way to take AP exams. This legislation would address barriers by requiring that DCPS allow homeschooled students to sit for AP exams at the DCPS school that the student could attend of right, or at a reasonable alternate location when the student's at right school is not offering that particular AP exam. For both of these bills, or rather for this hearing, the record will be open for 2 weeks. That is, it will close at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, October 11th. I believe we've been joined by Councilmember Henderson, and I don't know if you have an opening statement, but if you do, please proceed.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to you and everyone who is watching and our public witnesses who have signed up today. I appreciate you holding this hearing. I'm going to speak specifically to the SMART Act, which is the bill that I introduced. I want to express at the top an appreciation to Black Swan Academy and the DC Girls Coalition who I believe some will be here and testifying today, for bringing this issue to the attention of the council, and for working with my office on this legislation. I introduced the Student and Minor Access to Records and Transcript Act of 2021, or SMART Act, to address the issues that some students are facing for planning for life after school, especially in situations in which parents or guardians are not actively involved in the planning process. Currently, students in the district under the age of 18 need parental consent for their local education agency to send their transcripts to them or to another school, a college, a university, or another entity. Most students applying for college are doing so when they're 17 years old, even 16 in some cases. And those whose birthdays occur after the college application deadlines or scholarship application deadlines are left without recourse. For students who are in foster care or who are experiencing homelessness or whose parents are an impediment to their planning, the status quo presents unsurmountable barriers. While federal law grants parents control over access educational records until the child is 18, students may also be granted such rights. The SMART Act would do just that, allowing minors that are 16 years of age or older to request or receive their educational records. This includes grades, class schedules, assessments, scores, transcripts, and academic standings. And although I think this will come up in the testimony as I think about this, I'm not sure why any of this information should be kept from a young person who is in high school, why you can't get access to your grades, your class schedules, scores, transcripts without your parental consent. When I was in school, to get my transcript sent somewhere for if I was applying for a scholarship or whatever, you just had to go to the guidance counselor's office, fill out the form with the information around where the transcript is to be sent, and that was done. This additional burden of needing a parent's signature just seems like an extra step that's unnecessary. So this bill also, if available, the local education agency must provide the records with the gender mark that matches the minor's gender identity. And LEAs would have 15 days to comply and honor the request. I think students have legitimate needs for paperwork, legitimate needs for their records, and should be able to make the decision that's best for them. And so I thank everyone for attending today, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. I'm going to invite the 10 witnesses that we have, the 10 non-government witnesses, to come to the virtual table so that we can hear from them. Tamara Lewis, who is Senior Director of Government Affairs at the DC Charter School Alliance. Jessica Giles, who's State Director with Education Reform Now. Kyle Myers, who's also with Education Reform Now. Helen Dooley. Rachel White, who is a Senior Youth Policy Analyst at DC Action. I have Kyle Myers listed a second time. This time as Community Organizer with Education Reform Now. Antonio Coronado, who is Clinical Teaching Fellow with the REAL, that's REEL, REAL Policy Clinic at Georgetown University Law Center. Samantha Davis, who's Executive Director of the Black Swan Academy. Marcus Ransom, who's Student Attorney at Georgetown Law School Racial Equity and Education Law and Policy Clinic. And Amber Freeney, who is also with the Georgetown Law School Racial Equity and Education Law and Policy Clinic. Let me see. The witness list said 4 minutes. So witnesses will have 4 minutes. And Ms. Lewis, are you here? Great. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Henderson, and others. My name is Tammy Lewis. I'm the Senior Director of Government Affairs for the DC Charter School Alliance, the local nonprofit that advocates on behalf of public charter schools to ensure that every student can choose high-quality public schools that prepare them for lifelong success. I'm here today to testify in enthusiastic support of the Student and Minor Access to Records and Transcripts SMART Act of 2021. Many schools have older students who are still under 18 that, for a variety of reasons, would greatly benefit from being allowed to personally request their transcripts and records. I'm sorry, I have had a computer just die in front of me. So I will just speak to you. We have a lot of students in our schools who, whether they may be in foster care, as I once was, whether they may be experiencing homelessness, or simply have some difficult situations with parents or legal guardians, have a need to be able to timely receive their educational records, to be able to participate in any number of training opportunities and other programs, as well as apply for college and career opportunities. We feel that, particularly given that we're entering the third year of the pandemic, that we need to have a sense of tremendous urgency, particularly for our high school students, those who have the least amount of time to recover from the impacts of the pandemic and who may have missed many supportive opportunities during high school that were disrupted through the pandemic. We think this bill particularly speaks to the unique needs of many of our at-risk students who are most under-resourced and most vulnerable. We think this is a small thing that could have significantly positive impact for these students, and our schools are enthusiastic about wanting to support this measure. As I noted in my written testimony that you should have, we have two relatively minor questions and concerns we want to present around implementation. The first is that our schools want to make sure that as you move forward with the final draft, that schools are protected from any challenges with compliance with the Federal Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA. It does have a number of exemptions that we think would cover this bill, and we think it just might be helpful to be a little more clear about those in the final piece of legislation. Secondly, some school leaders have asked us whether there needs to be any requirement to provide notice to parents, custodial or non-custodial, when their minor children request these records. We're not necessarily advocating for that. We're simply identifying some potential for some disconnect with families. And we just like to make sure we have clear guidance from the council on what the council's wishes are on that issue. Finally, we think the timeline provided in this bill is quite reasonable, and our schools are prepared to meet that timeline. We are eager to work with the council to implement this measure as quickly as possible. We are thankful for Councilmember Henderson and others for bringing this measure forward. Thank you for giving us a chance to testify, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Ms. Giles.
Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Henderson, and members of staff of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Jessica Giles. I'm a Ward 7 resident and State Director of Education Reform Now, DC. EARN DC is a nonprofit organization that fights for a just and equitable public education system for all students in the District of Columbia. I will be testifying today on Bill 24-0665, Access to Advanced Placement Exams Amendment Act of 2022, and my colleague Kyle Mowers will be testifying on the other bill. Overall, we support the intent of the bill, which is to provide homeschool students with a public school location to take the AP exam. However, my testimony will focus on ways to increase transparency in AP data and improve AP exam passage rates. So the first issue of increased transparency in AP data, there's three issues that I want to raise with this topic. Number one, it appears that not all DCPS and public charter high schools are offering AP courses. There are 42 public high schools, but only 36 offer AP courses according to College Board data. The DC School Report Card reveals there may be a higher number of schools not offering AP courses. There's probably good explanations for this, but wanted to flag for the committee of the whole. Number two, it is difficult to determine which AP courses are taught at schools. This information isn't found on the DCPS data set. It's not on the DC School Report Card, and it may not be found on individual school websites. This makes it difficult for students and families to know what their AP options are, and for the district to determine where there are gaps in subject area offerings. Greater transparency is needed. Number three, we encourage you all to check how DC schools determine eligibility for AP courses. It's my understanding that the district does not automatically enroll students into AP courses once they've demonstrated proficiency in a subject. The district may want to consider implementing automatic enrollment because it is a strong equity strategy that is proven to increase the number of students of color taking and passing advanced coursework. Colorado, Nevada, North Carolina, Washington, Illinois have all made great strides on this issue. And so the second topic for today is improving AP credit transfers rates. Three issues within this topic I want to raise. In 2018, DC was number 1 in the nation for average AP scores for white students and number 46 in the nation for average AP scores for Black students. This exposes very deep and troubling opportunity gaps in our education system, so we have to continue to make great strides on closing these gaps. Number two, DC does not have a policy mandating that students are awarded credit for minimum scores on AP courses. So any student who scores 3 or higher on the AP exam should receive credit for that course. According to College Board, a 3 is equivalent of a C or C+ in a college level course. Currently, only 2 higher education institutions in the district accepts 3s on AP exams. We believe all colleges and universities in the district should change their policy to give students credits for making at least 3 on the exam. And lastly, about half of the educators teaching AP courses in DCPS did not major in the subject they were teaching. I strongly urge the committee of the whole to follow up on this issue to understand how DCPS is tackling this issue. In closing, I encourage the committee of the whole to strengthen college and career readiness in the District of Columbia by increasing transparency in AP score data and improving AP credit transfers rates. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. I am available to answer any questions you may have and to follow up after the hearing if helpful.
Thank you, Ms. Giles. Kyle Myers.
Good morning, Chairman Mendelson and
Good morning.
Councilman. Can you hear me? Sorry. Good morning, Chairman Mendelson and Councilmember Christine Henderson and the committee of a whole. My name is Kyle Myers. I'm a Ward 5 resident, equity advocate, and a community organizer for Education Reform Now DC. We are a nonprofit organization focused on providing a more equitable public education system for all students. I am testifying today in support of B24-232, the Student Minor Access to Records Transcript SMART Act of 2021. I believe the DC Council should also consider amending it. Students must have access to all of their documentation during the school year and post-graduation. Students need these records for a multitude of reasons: transferring to a different school, applying for college, or seeking admissions to trade schools or vocational programs. Despite everyone knowing the significance of these documents, our students and adults in some cases still face challenges when attempting to retrieve them. The SMART Act will lower the age required for minors to request their records from 18 to 16 years old, which I support. And lowering the age will allow it for students to act independently who are in foster care, victims of neglectful parenting, or experiencing homelessness. Please also note that the Summer Youth Employment Program, also known as SYEP, requires a transcript for students as young as 14 years old. The DC Council may want to review if 16 is the right age cutoff. The amount of time it takes for a student to receive their transcripts can hinder their decision-making process when applying to colleges and put them at a disadvantage. As I recall my own personal experience, it took weeks for me to receive my documents in 2016. I was 18 when I graduated high school. After several attempts of contacting the school and getting the same response, I physically went to the campus and pleaded with one of my counselors, who then sent me my transcripts the following day. By this time, my options for colleges were limited because I had to submit the documents so late and fell short of certain deadlines, which also resulted in fees from the colleges. There needs to be a considerably faster turnaround when students request these documents so they do not face the same issues when applying to colleges. These are crucial decisions, so students need all their documents to be returned quickly and made easily accessible. I recommend this process be shortened from 15 days to 5 days. In an effort to improve record keeping and data sharing, Tyrique Williams, a Ward 5 resident, DC voter, and a friend who attended high school in DC, faced different challenges after graduating in 2016 at the age of 17. He was unfortunately incarcerated for 18 months. After being released in 2017, he attempted to retrieve his transcripts and other documents necessary to pursue new opportunities, such as finding a job and enrolling in a vocational educational program, Again, it took multiple attempts to contact the school administration just for them to reach a dead end. The administrators informed him that they could not locate his transcripts. This was a major hindrance to his goals due to the misplacement of the records and to the time it took to retrieve them. It also served as a mental deterrent for a young Black man trying to recover and succeed. Additionally, the DC has published a story about how a student named Aaliyah Jones was told she had to take additional classes after she graduated from National Collegiate Prep. The DC Council should continue to push the Office of State Superintendent of Education to quickly build the student data warehouse so all local education agencies, students and families have easily accessible records. If passed, the DC Council should also require all LEAs to include the policies on their websites and in students' handbooks, along with information on student privacy. Thank you for introducing this legislation and holding a hearing on it. This is the first step of ensuring a more strategic thought, planning, and execution goes into sharing student records. And thank you for allowing me to testify. I am available for any questions and to follow up if needed.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Helen Dooley.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Helen Dooley. I am a 25-year resident of the district, and I live with my husband and our children in Ward 3. I am here to testify in support of Bill 24665, Access to Advanced Placement Exams Amendment Act of 2022. Many thanks to the council and committee for considering the bill, and to Councilmember Che and Chairman Mendelson for introducing it. I've been homeschooling in the district for 11 years. My oldest child is a homeschooled high school junior and has been directly impacted by the lack of access to advanced placement exams for homeschoolers in the district. In order to take an AP exam, a homeschooled student must be registered with the College Board through a school that offers that exam. Homeschoolers are not permitted to register for an exam on their own. The College Board provides a list of which schools offer which AP courses and thus AP exams. The homeschooling family then contacts the applicable school or schools to request permission for the homeschooled student to take applicable AP exam or exams. Last year, my daughter needed to be registered for 2 different AP exams, both of which were offered by our local public high school, Jackson Reed, then known as Wilson. We reached out to the AP coordinator at Jackson Reed and asked that my daughter be registered to take the exams, and we made clear that we were willing to pay the exam fees. The AP coordinator was happy to accommodate my daughter, but DCPS would not allow it. DCPS said that the cost of AP exams are covered centrally for DCPS students, and there was no mechanism to collect payment from homeschooled families, and no mechanism could be created, including writing a check made out to the school. DC regulations governing homeschoolers state that homeschooled students may participate free of charge in the regularly scheduled standardized testing programs that are administered in the public school the child is eligible to attend. That's 5209.1. DCPS's position was that regularly scheduled standardized testing programs do not include AP exams, and refused to allow my daughter to take any exam at any DCPS school, even if we were willing to pay the exam fees. I spent most of the fall of 2021 going back and forth with DCPS and OSSI on this matter. And in the meantime, I was scrambling to find a school that would allow my daughter to take her exams. While we did eventually find one, the entire process was very time consuming and caused unnecessary anxiety, particularly for my daughter, who worked very hard in her AP classes and was eager to take the exams. In my experience, DC private and charter schools are not willing to accommodate homeschoolers for AP exams. And the logical place for a DC homeschooled student to take an AP exam is the local public high school, if that school offers the exam, or another DCPS school that offers the exam. Over this past year, I also learned that Maryland public schools make this process very easy for homeschoolers. Homeschoolers in Maryland need only contact the AP coordinator at their local public school. If the school offers the requested class and thus the requested exam, the homeschool family simply pays the required exam fee in a check made payable to the school, and the student is registered to take the exam. Bill 24-665 would make the process similarly easy for homeschooling families in DC. Homeschooling families in DC appreciate the city's efforts to provide equitable access to city services available to all district students, such as the Kids Ride Free program. In the same spirit, we ask that the council pass Bill 24-665 to allow homeschooled students to take AP exams at DC public schools. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Dooley. Rachel White.
Good morning, Chairman Mendelson and members of the Committee of the Whole. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee today. My name is Rachel White, and I am DC Action's Senior Youth Policy Analyst. At DC Action, we use research, data, and a racial equity lens to break down barriers that stand in the way of all kids reaching their full potential. Our collaborative advocacy initiatives bring the power of young people and all residents to raise their voices to create change. Through our Youth Economic Justice and Housing Coalition, we advocate with youth and youth-serving organizations in the District of Columbia for policies, funding, and programs that expand access to comprehensive supports and services that families and unaccompanied youth experiencing homelessness need to successfully transition into stable and productive adulthood. We are also home of DC Kids Count, an online resource that tracks key indicators of child and youth well-being. I'm here today to testify in support of Bill 24-232, Student and Minors Access to Records and Transcripts, or the SMART Act, with amendments. In its current form, the SMART Act allows minors 16 and older to request and receive their educational records. We agree with the DC Girls Coalition assessment that the current bill takes a key first step ensuring that young people have access to their education documents, yet we're asking the council to take a step further in giving young people the authorities to use those records to further their education when their parents or guardians are unable to support them in this way. We are asking that an amendment be made to this bill so that students under the age of 18 in the District of Columbia who for any reason need to access their school records in order to make a decision with these records shall have access to them and shall have the authority to make the decisions regarding their education, such as transfers, enrollment, or any other institutional processes that ensure students' right to education under the following three circumstances. Number one, there is no engaged or responsive parent or guardian. Number two, an identified parent or guardian is making a decision that is harmful to or counter to the student's reasonable wishes. And number three, an identified parent or guardian does not have the capacity to support a student in this way. This expansion will provide the most vulnerable young people with the opportunity to have some agency over decisions that impact their lives, especially those in difficult family circumstances, such as the 50+ unaccompanied youth experiencing homelessness under 18 in the district. One way to prevent youth who are homeless from entering into the adult homeless system is by providing youth in the district a pathway to economic freedom in the form of educational access. So thank you for your time and consideration today. I've sent my full written testimony to the committee prior to the hearing, and I will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White. Antonio Coronado.
Thank you, Chairman Mendelson. Am I coming through okay for the committee?
Yes.
Perfect. Good morning, Chairman Mendelson and members of the Committee of the Whole. Thank you, Council Members Henderson, White, George, Allen, Nadeau, Che, and Pinto for your leadership on this legislation. My name is Antonio Coronado, and I'm a clinical teaching fellow with the Racial Equity and Education Law and Policy Clinic at Georgetown University Law Center. As a fellow, I research, study, and teach about issues of racial inequality within public education. I am joined today by two of our outstanding student attorneys, Amber Freeney and Marcus Ransom. They, like me, are here in support of our client, Black Swan Academy, and they join me in sharing some of the many reasons why we believe the SMART Act affirms the inherent dignity of young people. Our clinic strongly believes that this bill and the amendments proposed by the DC Girls Coalition are progress toward a future where young people are affirmed in their journeys to independence and where adults are partners, not barriers, to youth as decision makers. The SMART Act recognizes that our youth should not have to choose between living as their fullest selves and accessing their futures. By eliminating the need for parental consent to access one's education records, this bill affirms the autonomy and agency of DC youth. Without this bill, we sell a hollow promise of independence to our youth, one that is especially harmful for LGBTQIA youth who may be exiting unsupportive homes. The SMART Act will help ensure that DC youth, regardless of their situation or their resources, have improved access to employment, education, and self-determination. While this bill will uplift all DC youth, we know that the SMART Act will have a positive impact on the lives of Black LGBTQIA youth in DC and for queer and transgender youth who hold multiple marginalized identities. According to 2020 data from DC Kids Count, we know that 39% of non-parenting, unaccompanied homeless youth in DC are LGBTQIA. Furthermore, we know that 14% of this same demographic of young folks are transgender or gender nonconforming. When this data is connected to research from True Colors United, reporting that 80% of queer youth experiencing homelessness were forced out of their homes or pressured to run away, we see a deeply troubling situation for LGBTQIA youth in DC. Our youth are told that they can begin working at age 14, that they can take on significant work hours at age 16, but that they're not old enough to request the very records they may need to secure employment until they're 18. The SMART Act remedies this inequity by ensuring all DC youth can access their educational records regardless of their parental relationship, and that they can continue developing as independent members of our district. For the reasons that I've shared, the Racial Equity and Education Law and Policy Clinic strongly issues our support for the SMART Act with the amendments as proposed by the DC Girls Coalition. We urge you, the committee, to take favorable action on this bill and the proposed amendments, and we welcome the opportunity to be a resource to the committee as you consider this critical legislation. Thank you, Chairman Mendelson, council members, for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Coronado. Samantha Davis.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Henderson. My dog Prince is likely going to join us throughout this whole time, so please forgive me in advance for that. I am Samantha Davis. I am the Executive Director of Black Swan Academy, and we are a member of the DC Girls Coalition. I come before you all today in support of the SMART Act and the request that you all consider, including some improvements to the bill that young folk within DC Youth Coalition and throughout the community have highlighted to us throughout the course of the creation of this bill. For the purpose of time, I'm going to focus my remarks on the proposed amendments to the SMART Act. However, my full testimony has been submitted to you. I also want to acknowledge that we were not able to have young folk participate in this hearing today. However, their voice is reflected throughout our testimonies, and they have also submitted some written testimonies for you all to consider. So the DC Girls Coalition requests your consideration of 3 proposed amendments to strengthen this bill. Number 1, first is the age of accessing student records be lowered to age 14 and older, or a freshman in high school. Number 2, the bill permits students to amend their education records. And number 3, that the bill allow youth to make related legal decisions in the following 3 limited circumstances without parental consent. 1 is when there is no engaged or responsive parent or guardian. 2 is when an identified parent or guardian is making a decision that is harmful to or counter to the student's reasonable wishes as indicated by the student. Or number 3, due to circumstantial factors, it's not practical for an identified parent or guardian to provide their consent or otherwise make a decision on the student's behalf. The First Amendment proposed by DC Girls Coalition to amend the age of students to access their education records to age 14. When we adopt this amendment, DC would join other jurisdictions around the country, including California, Delaware, and Massachusetts, in permitting minors age 14 and older to access their education records. Furthermore, the district permits young people age 14 and up to begin to participate in employment, which recognizes their agency and their ability to handle such responsibilities. For the Second Amendment proposed by DC Girls Coalition, the proposed amendment, and in this case, we're referring to the amendment that will allow students to amend their education records. This proposed amendment is consistent with the legislative language included in similar laws enacted in other jurisdictions that permit those who can access and review their education records the opportunity to contest and request the amendment of components that may be inaccurate or incomplete. For example, one of our Black Swan youth members realized that her records did not indicate her completion of a class that she took as a graduation requirement. She was only able to resolve this oversight with the intervention of Black Swan Academy, and it escalated to include members of DC Council who insisted that the school correct the oversight. So with this amendment, allowing students the opportunity to review and request the amendment to their education records can help for more timely and resolve such issues. And then lastly, when we're looking at the amendment for legal decisions, specifically with this amendment would enable students to make legal decisions in specific circumstances. And so we think about if the deadline to enroll in a school may be approaching, but a parent has not provided the necessary consent for the students to enroll in the school. Under this proposed amendment, a student may be able to enroll in that school to ensure that they are able to maintain consistency within their education. There are several other examples listed throughout our testimony, but see that my time is up. And so again, appreciate the time spent here. Thank you to Councilmember Henderson for your leadership on this bill and all those who have sponsored it. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Marcus Ransom.
Good morning, Chairman Mendelson and members of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Marcus Ransom, and I'm a second-year law student at Georgetown University Law Center. I'm a student attorney with Georgetown Law's Racial Equity and Education Law and Policy Clinic, and I work to address issues of racial inequality in public education through legislative and policy analysis and advocacy. Ensuring that young people in DC have access to their education records is critical in helping them to obtain agency over their own educational and life outcomes. I'm here today to testify in support of the SMART Act with the amendments proposed by Black Swan Academy and the DC Girls Coalition. The SMART Act is a key first step in the right direction of providing young people with the ability to access their education records and also claim their independence. So today I'll discuss young people in foster care and why accessing their education records without parental consent is important. According to the DC Department of Children and Family Services, approximately 12% of minors in the foster care system exited by emancipation in fiscal year 2021. Emancipation refers to the process of foster youth transitioning out of the foster care system without reunification, guardianship, or adoption. This is a large step for young people to go out on their own without adult support. And furthermore, nearly half of the foster care population in DC is composed of teens aged 14 to 21. And the planning process for preparing youth for emancipation through what's known as the Alternative Planned Permanent Living Arrangement, that can begin at age 16 and sometimes even earlier, depending on the circumstances. System-involved foster youth preparing to age out of the system in this way often don't have the support of a caring adult and may need to request their education records prior to age 18 in order to apply for things like higher education and scholarships, pursue employment opportunities, plan for their future, and generally just gain independence. And given this reality and the fact that in fiscal year 2021, 80% of youth age 18 and under involved in the foster care system were Black, the passage of the SMART Act is critical to better supporting the city's Black youth and promoting greater racial equity. And from another lens, research on students in foster care shows a consistent theme, and that is that children in foster care face significant barriers to their educational progress. According to a 2015 report we found, only 56% of surveyed foster care youth age 19 in DC reported finishing high school or obtaining their GED. This is in contrast and despite national findings showing that over 70% of students in foster care express a desire to go to college. And compounding these challenges is the reality that young people living in group homes often experience delays in accessing their education records, which can undermine their efforts to pursue higher education or other opportunities to support their independence. And one state noted that the average length of time needed to obtain records was reported to range between 40 and 82 days. And a current sophomore student that we spoke with in our clinic recently told us that even though they haven't had the need to access their education records yet, they want to have the autonomy to be able to do so. And as another student put it to us recently, passing this bill should be simple. So in closing, to ensure that young people, particularly those involved in the foster care system, are able to exercise their autonomy and plan for their futures, the DC Council must pass the SMART Act. And passage of the SMART Act will not only help CFSA better serve students, but it will also help to promote more stability and consistency and security for all young people in the district. So thank you, Chairman Mendelson and members of the Committee of the Whole for the opportunity to express my support for the SMART Act along with the amendments proposed by the DC Girls Coalition and Black Swan Academy. And I'm happy to respond to any questions the council members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ransom. I do not have a copy of your statement. It would be helpful if we had that. So if you could send that. Amber Freeney.
Good afternoon, Chairman Middleson and members of the committee. My name is Amber Freeney, and I'm a third-year student at Georgetown University Law Center. I am a student attorney for the Georgetown Law, Racial Equity and Education Law and Policy Clinic, and I work to address racial inequality in public education through legislative and policy analysis and advocacy. We ensure that young people in the district have access to their educational records because it is critical in helping them obtain agency over their own educational and life outcomes. I am here today to testify in support of the SMART Act with the amendments proposed by Black Swan Academy and the DC Girls Coalition. The SMART Act allows young people the ability to access their educational records and claim their independence. The DC Girls Coalition is proposing that the amendment to give students age 14 and older access to their own educational records. By adopting this amendment, the district would be joining other states that have passed similar legislation by permitting young people age 14 and older to access their records. For example, Delaware enacted legislation in 2012 permitting students age 14 and older to inspect and review their educational records. Another example is in Massachusetts. In 2017, they enacted a law permitting students of any age to receive a copy of their transcripts and permitting students at age 14 or ninth grade to access their educational records. The state of California similarly adopted a law that permitted students age 16 or in ninth grade to access their educational records. However, California also recognized that certain students with special circumstances need to access their educational records at an earlier age and included a provision that allowed students age 14 older to access their records if a student is homeless or considered unaccompanied as identified under federal law. I urge the council to consider special circumstances that many students in the district encounter along with the educational journeys. As you will hear today and learn from the testimony submitted by my client, Black Swan Academy, and some of the Black Swan Academy youth, many young people in the DC experience homelessness, family crisis, or economic challenges, which may for them to need their own educational records. I want to thank the chairman and the members of the committee as a whole, and I want to express support for the SMART Act and our client of Black Swan Academy, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freeney. And I likewise don't have a copy of your statement. If you could provide that, I'd appreciate it. We'll have one 5-minute round of questions. And I have a couple. Ms. White, when you testified, you asked that an amendment be made so that students under the age of 18 who for any reason need access to their school records shall have access to them. and shall have the authority to make decisions regarding their education, such as transfers, enrollment, and any other institutional processes under the following circumstances. Is your suggestion similar to what we've heard from other witnesses?
Yes, yes, sir.
So you're not making a distinction there?
No, the distinction is, the only distinction is any age, like regardless of age, that youth can access their records under those three circumstances. If the parent is unavailable or if they're causing harm to the child or it doesn't have the capacity to do so.
Well, that begs a question, which I don't know if I want to ask of you or of Ms. Davis or one of the other witnesses, and that is, why would somebody younger than high school be wanting to access their records?
Well, I can answer some of that. Like if they want access to their grades or they need to transfer to a different school and need access to their grades, those are situations where that can apply to someone that's 16, someone that's 15, not just 16 and older.
Well, there was some testimony about 14, but you said any age.
Yes.
So you're not even saying 14.
No, I wasn't. I was adopting the recommendations from the DC Girls Coalition, where they have examples of youth in foster care and youth experiencing homelessness who were dealing with obstacles and battles, accessing their records, impeding the educational outcomes.
Well, let me ask Ms. Davis.
Yeah.
Because your testimony went into more detail here. Why as low as age 14? That's what you testified to. When I went through high school, I don't think, in fact, I think to this day, and it's been a few years since I was in high school, I don't think I've ever asked for my educational record. So why is it so important that we say below 16, that we say 14?
Yeah, so the reality is when a lot of those the needs for transcripts, the needs to transfer schools, the needs to change your school schedule, to be able to start working, if it's summer youth employment program, that starts when you're in high school. So 14 and or 9th grade is what that age represents. We had a young person, to answer your question, if we were considering under the age of 18, we have a young person who submitted testimony who I believe is in the 8th grade, who shared a story of realizing that there was a problem with her grade. She was told that she failed a class, and in reality, she actually didn't. And so she needed to engage in a pretty long process to get her parents involved in order to get that grade changed. And so you see that happening with any age, and depending on your involvement of your parent or guardian, allowing someone younger to be able to make those decisions around grades, classes, what have you, will assist in that. But the 14 in high school is specifically looking at summer youth employment program, is looking at the requirements of high schoolers when it comes to everything that can happen, particularly in the district. A lot of our young folk have been transferring between DC public schools and DC public charter schools. And usually that does happen in 9th or 10th grade, oftentimes under the age of 16. And so being able to have the autonomy to do such work will be pretty beneficial.
In order to transfer, more is involved than just simply being able to transfer your transcript. Are you going that far in saying that a child should be able to make a decision regarding what school at the age of 14?
We are saying that young people within those specific circumstances are given the authority to make the decisions that benefit their education and life outcomes.
Including what school they attend?
Yes.
The challenge there is that it's asking the school system to determine whether there's an engaged or responsive parent, or whether there's a parent or guardian making a decision that is harmful to or counter to the student's reasonable wishes. I mean, that's forcing the school system to get more involved in making these subjective determinations. Correct?
They're subjective if we're not counting taking the young people's words for it, or our experiences, right? And reaching out to parents and guardians. Other folk, I can continue to answer your questions, happy to do so, but I saw other folk raise their hands and wasn't sure if they had.
Well, I'm almost out of time. In fact, I am out of time. I think I'll leave it there. Thank you. Thank you, each of you. Councilmember Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, thank you to everyone who testified. Ms. Davis, I wanted to get a couple of things on the record from conversations that we had leading up to this bill and sort of the impetus around it. And like I mentioned in my opening, right, when I was in high school, you filled out a form, your transcript got sent wherever it needed to go. We had access to our grades. You had conversations with teachers. Like it was a treating kids, high school students, and training them up to be the young adults who are going to need to engage in these conversations if they pursue post-secondary without parents, right? Like imagine you have an issue with a grade in college and your mom calls your professor. Like what? I mean, that happens, but sort of the ideas around that. But also, I think it came up in the conversation, and maybe you can confirm, are there any schools to your knowledge who are still charging students to receive access to their transcripts?
Not to my knowledge. We haven't come across that. There's been a couple instances where you will have to fill out like an additional form for a waiver, but that hasn't happened in a few years.
Okay.
For us, I don't know if others have experience with it.
Okay, but in terms of so in terms of one of the amendments that you all are seeking around lowering the age, I understand that from an extent of allowing high school students across the freshmen to seniors being able to do this. I do have a little bit of pause, I think, in terms of allowing any young person to make the decision about educational placements, et cetera, transfers without any sort of parental consent. Because I think in terms of my understanding of the process, right, if a student is needing to seek a safety transfer, for example, a school is reaching out to a parent or a guardian for that conversation. And then I believe that if, let's say, DCPS is not getting the feedback that they're looking for from that parent, they're still going to make a decision in determination of the best interest of the young person from a safety perspective. Is that not what's happening here?
So there's issues of safeties, and how we've seen it in practice is it really depends on the young person. It depends on who they're working with within DCPS or in their schools. And there's other circumstances that are beyond safety where young folk might need to transfer, where young folk might need to make corrections. And it's not, this amendment is not all young people. It is specific to parents not being engaged or responsive. It is limited to when parents are making decisions that are counter and harmful to young people's wishes. And so it does limit what young folk and when this consent is waived, essentially.
Okay. Because I think that, to the chairman's point, some of that can get a bit subjective. And like if I think back, right, I didn't want to go to the middle school that I ended up going to, but my mom wanted me to go to that school. And I might have thought, this is harmful to me, even though like I was fine. I was just being an angsty teenager. Now my school district would, under this scenario, my school district would then have to sort of like tease out whether or not my parent is being harmful by wanting me to go to this school that I didn't want to go to versus some other type of thing. And so I think sometimes I guess I would just sort of be interested, and I'm forecasting this for our government witnesses and sort of teasing this out a bit more. Okay. I want to spend just a minute, Miss Dooley, on the AP bill, because I know that the chairman said we only have like 5 minutes altogether. Hi. So you said, I think I heard you say in your testimony that Maryland makes this process super easy in terms of the classes are on the website, and then you just have to contact the coordinator to do so. Is there a and I hate to ask you this, I could look this up, but is there a deadline by which you have to do this? Because I know from a College Board perspective, there's a certain period of time where you have to order the test. So I'm wondering, like, you can't just show up the week before and say, I want my kid to be tested.
No, that's correct. I don't know exactly what the deadlines are. Within the homeschool community, we always say start as soon as you can once the school year begins to reach out to the schools. I believe the initial deadline is like November 1st. There's various deadlines that the College Board provides. You can order tests up through March, but there's a late fee associated with that, although they do waive the late fee for homeschoolers. But yes, it does need to be done, in the fall, and I would certainly support any amendment to the bill that required homeschoolers to comply with deadlines, reasonably set by DCPS as, applicable by the College Board.
Okay, I'm out of time. Thank you guys so much for testifying today.
Councilmember, if you have another question, I'll let you throw it in.
Oh, thank you. Okay, Ms. Dooley, sorry. So in that same realm, I think one of the concerns that I had in sort of reading the bill was, okay, how is DCPS or any LEA supposed to know who out there in the universe of homeschoolers are wanting to engage in this? One of the other things too that I would be interested to kind of hear more about is, I know that the way that our school system is set up, no one ever just cuts a check to the school, right? Our individual schools don't have bank accounts. The PTAs might, but it's not like you're just going to cut a check to Banneker and then they're going to allow for the students to take it. You would have to send it to the DC treasurer, and it's this whole situation, that kind of thing. And so I think what I'm hearing from you, and I hate to sort of put you as the representative, but I think you're the only one who's here sort of in that representative role as a parent of a homeschooler, you would be fine paying for the test, which I think some other LEAs do require, charter LEAs do require students' families to pay to take the test unless you have a financial burden, et cetera, et cetera. You're not asking that the city also pay and DCPS provide it.
My particular family, that's correct. We would pay the fees. There probably are families in the district that are homeschooling that if they have limited resources, I would certainly be in favor of the city providing, some assistance to them. I understand, homeschooling is a choice, and, people do have the opportunity to attend DCPS if they wish. So I understand there's issues there, but that's correct. Certainly for our family and for families, homeschooled families that are, well-resourced, it does seem very fair to have the family pay the fees, which I think is true at most of the public jurisdictions in the area in Virginia and Maryland outside of the district. That the students who attend those public schools, their families do pay for those tests. That would be fair for homeschooled families in the DC to do that as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember. That does lead me to one question, Ms. Dooley. What are the fees? What is the application fee for an exam?
This year, I believe it's $101 per exam. I think it's $97 for the exam, and then I think there's a few additional dollars as some kind of administrative fee. So for a family that is not heavily resourced, that would be a heavy lift, particularly for students who take a lot of APs, which advanced students do. I certainly have known families that have had several $100s, worth of exams that their student is able to take. For our particular family, we could afford that, and that would be fine. Like I said, there may be families in the district who could not, and I do think it would be fair for the city to provide for them.
Thank you. I want to thank each of the witnesses. You all are going to be excused. I'm going to call the two government witnesses. I want to note, well, first, let me call the two government witnesses, Sarah Navarro, who's Senior Deputy Chief of Secondary Schools within DCPS, and Dr. Antoinette Mitchell, who's Assistant Superintendent of Post-Secondary and Career Education within the Office of the State Superintendent for Education, otherwise known as OSSE. While they're coming forward, I want to note we have a hearing scheduled at 1 o'clock. There may be some folks who have already come on. It's the same link. That hearing will begin shortly after this hearing ends. So let me see. I'm waiting for Sarah Navarro and Dr. Mitchell.
Good afternoon, Chairman. I'm here. This is Sarah Navarro.
Why don't we begin with you and is Dr. Mitchell here yet?
Yes, Chairman. Antoinette is here.
Okay. I was on speaker view, so that denies me full visual. Who wants to go first? Ms. Navarro? Is that okay?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you so much, Chairman. Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, members of the council and staff. I am Sarah Navarro, Senior Deputy Chief of Secondary Schools at DCPS. On behalf of Mayor Bowser, I'm honored to testify before you today on Bills 24-232, the Student and Minor Access to Records and Transcripts, or SMART Act of 2021, and 24-665, the Access to Advanced Placement Exams Amendment Act of 2022. As you know, DCPS is committed to the support of all students and ensuring their safety and success as they grow academically and as individuals to become successful members of their communities. I will first address Bill 24-232, the Student and Minor Access to Educational Records legislation. As introduced, this bill would permit minors 16 years of age or older, without the consent of a parent or guardian, to access their education records. DCPS believes that students should have consistent access to their information. Currently, students can see their schedules, grades, and attendance in Aspen, a student information database, at any time. They also have a yearly letter of understanding, or LOU, conversation with school counselors where they review their transcript. In addition, every student receives a guide to graduation, career, and college annually that also includes the student's transcripts. It is not DCPS's practice to withhold student records from 16 and 17-year-olds who request them, nor does DCPS require parental consent for students under age 18 to receive a transcript or to send it to another school, as is stated in this bill's introductory statement. The Federal Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA, requires an educational agency or institution to provide a parent with an opportunity to inspect, review, and request amendments to their child's education records, and transfers that right to students age 18 years of age. It also prohibits agencies and institutions from sharing those records with other parties without parental consent, with exception. Section 34 CFR 99.31A of FERPA lists the exceptions for when you need parental or adult student consent to share records. Subsection A2 allows educational agencies or institutions to disclose records to post-secondary institutions without parental consent. And subsection A2 allows sharing with students themselves. This is DCPS's practice. We provide transcripts to students under the age of 18 and to post-secondary schools without requiring parental consent. While this bill makes mandatory what is already permitted, a new bill is not necessary to achieve the goal of providing transcripts and records to students, as this is already practice. While we support access to records, we are concerned that the 15-day requirement is an unreasonably short amount of time in which to comply with requests. Providing educational records is not simply a matter of downloading and attaching the document or copying and pasting into a message. Records must be reviewed and checked for accuracy, redacted, especially in the case of records where other students' identifying information is included, compiled from various sources prior to production, etc., and must be completed by staff who have other assigned duties. In light of this, the federal government allows 45 days for records production under FERPA. This window of time considers the staffing capacity as well as processing time to retrieve and provide student transcripts and records. Severely cutting down that time to 15 days unnecessarily opens the district up to adverse consequences and increased liabilities that would also require additional staffing. Further, regarding Section 2B2 of the bill regarding gender markers and gender identity, DCPS is very supportive of our transgender and gender non-conforming students and has had guidance in effect instructing schools on how to support students in this area since 2015. Under this guidance, schools are instructed to use a student's preferred name and pronouns and note a student's preferences in Aspen to ensure that the school community continues to support a student as they progress in their education from grade to grade and class to class. Students' official name and gender are designations made on official government issued documentation, such as a birth certificate or official school records. Officially changing name and gender on government documentation, such as school records that are issued here, requires supporting government issued documentation to ensure accuracy, consistency, and limit liability. The U.S. Department of Education guidance provides that name and gender changes be made pursuant to government issued documentation such as a court order. DCPS currently changes student names and gender on official records pursuant to a court order, officially making those changes, and DCPS has found this process to be extremely efficient. DCPS regularly receives court orders from students who obtained a legal name or gender change, and their records are updated accordingly. The current process works well and represents a balance that allows students to be recognized and supported in schools by their preferred names and gender, while limiting errors and liabilities and maintaining alignment with federal guidance. Finally, it is DCPS's goal to prepare all of our students for college and career. As such, we support our students in pursuing their goals after they leave us. We would never want to prevent a student from obtaining their transcripts. If counsel hears from any students experiencing an issue obtaining transcripts without parental consent, please direct them to us for immediate assistance. Next, I will discuss Bill 24-665, the Advanced Placement Exams legislation. While DCPS defers to OSSI to provide primary testimony, we wanted to provide a few comments for consideration. First, the AP exam is owned and administered by an organization called the College Board. The College Board sets all the rules, requirements, timelines, costs, fees, and other items associated with the administration of the AP exam. As per the College Board, all students taking an AP exam must register through a school and then go to that school for the exam administration. There is no option for students to register directly with College Board or complete exams at home. Homeschooled students can register at any school, public, charter, private, or other, that is offering AP exams and is able to accommodate them. We believe in insertion of the phrase or other appropriate site as determined by DCPS in section 2A1 before the semicolon on page 1, line 28 would be needed if this bill is passed. The phrase would then read as follows. Within 180 days after the effective date of this act, the District of Columbia Public Schools shall permit non-enrollees to sit for an advanced placement exam at the student's right to attend school or another appropriate site as determined by DCPS, provided that the Office of the State Superintendent of Education has certified to DCPS that the non-enrollee is eligible to sit for the exam. This change is in alignment with and further supports lines 41 through 43 of the bill regarding reasonable alternate locations for testing. As it concerns costs, lines 51 through 53 read as follows. The College Board establishes fees for the AP exam. DCPS does not. The inclusion of exam cost provisions unnecessarily complicates this bill by creating budgetary and appropriations authority issues. DCPS neither budgets for nor is authorized to expend appropriated funds on non-enrolled DCPS students. Cost is undeterminable given the number of students that may choose to take AP exams, and exam rates and fees that may change at any time given they are set by the testing company. Exam cost is not an issue that we have heard about from inquiring families, and we believe the fee waiver process would sufficiently support families who need assistance. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today on these two bills. This concludes my remarks, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Navarro. Before I turn to Dr. Mitchell, you said at the very end, we believe the fee waiver process would sufficiently support families. What fee waiver process? The College Board's fee waiver process?
I'll allow my OSSI colleague to discuss the fee waiver process through OSSI.
Okay. Antoinette Mitchell?
Yes, thank you so much. Good morning, Chairman Mendelson and members of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Antoinette Mitchell, and I am the Assistant Superintendent for Post-Secondary and Career Education in the Office of the State Superintendent of Education. I am also a native Washingtonian and a proud graduate of DCPS. On behalf of Mayor Bowser, I am pleased to join you today to discuss Bill 24665, the Access to Advanced Placement Exams Amendment Act of 2022. Before diving into the bill, I would like to provide the council with some background information on AP placement, or AP, exams and how the examination process works from an administrative process. Advanced placement is one of 3 generally recognized opportunities for students to tackle college-level work while still in high school, along with dual enrollment and International Baccalaureate, or IB classes. For AP opportunities, students take college-level coursework in a class at their high school as part of their daily schedule. Students earn high school credit for AP classes, and their grades in these courses are calculated in their grade point average. In addition, students may take a corresponding AP exam at the conclusion of the course to potentially earn college credit. In 2023, AP exams will be administered in schools over 2 weeks in early May. Each exam is conducted at the same time nationwide. While administered in high school settings, these exams are created and scored by the College Board, a nonprofit organization. Scores range from 1 to 5, and colleges and universities set their own parameters for what, if any, scores they will accept as passing for the purposes of granting college credit. College Board currently offers 38 different AP subjects, and there were 45 schools in DC, both public and private, with AP courses available in the 2021-22 school year. Currently, College Board outlines a process for homeschool students to participate in the AP exam. Homeschool students are instructed to use the College Board course ledger to identify a nearby school, regardless of jurisdiction, that offers the selected subject and exam. Contact that school and ask the AP coordinator whether they are willing to arrange testing for the homeschool student. College Board recommends students do this as early in the school year as possible, as each LEA or private school may establish their own policies and deadlines regarding testing outside students. College Board's rules permit, but do not require, schools to charge homeschool students higher fees because there is a larger administrative burden to register such students. Standard fees vary by year and by exam, but standard exams will cost $97 this school year. Late registration costs an additional $40, and canceling an exam also costs $40. College Board offers a $35 fee reduction for low-income students. Eligibility for the fee reduction is based on College Board's low-income criteria, which differ depending on whether a school participates in the community eligibility provision, a program that enables high-poverty U.S. schools and districts to offer breakfast and lunch at no charge to all students. In DC, OSSI pays exam fees for low-income students, and LEAs pay exam fees for students ineligible for the fee reduction. It is the school's responsibility to identify whether a student is from a low-income background based upon College Board's definition when the schools register the student for the exam. And now that I have outlined College Board's AP exam registration process, I would like to turn to the specific requirements established in Bill 24-665. As introduced, Bill 24-665 obligates DCPS to enroll homeschool students in an exam-only section at the student's by right campus for every exam the student wants to take. It also requires DCPS to create a web page with information for homeschool students on registering for and taking AP exams, notify the student of the date and time of the exam, and provide the email and phone number for the AP coordinator. The bill also requires OSSI to confirm whether the student is participating in a homeschool program, to receive AP registration requests, and to verify income eligibility for fee reductions. Currently, income eligibility determinations for all test takers are completed at the school level. Finally, the bill requires DCPS and OSSI to pay for all AP exam fees for homeschool students. OSSI supports providing homeschool students increased access to AP exams. AP exam scores are one option homeschool students may use to demonstrate course completion for the purposes of applying to and accessing higher education. And we wish to encourage all DC residents to pursue the post-secondary pathway of their choice. However, OSSI does not support requiring the public to pay AP exam fees for homeschool students. OSSI's limited role as a state agency is to fund AP exams for low-income students enrolled in public and public charter schools, offer support and clear guidance on the obligations LEAs and schools have regarding families that choose to homeschool their children, and identify the rights of families that choose to homeschool their children. AP course registration, AP student enrollment, AP course instruction, AP test registration, and AP exam administration are the responsibilities of the schools and not OSSI. While there are many benefits to enrolling in public schools, including access to healthy meals and special education services, OSSI recognizes that some DC parents choose to homeschool their children in order to meet compulsory education requirements set forth in local law, and it is their right to do so. However, in doing so, parents of homeschool students are then responsible for absorbing necessary educational costs from books and curriculum to AP exam fees. If passed, this bill would allow parents that homeschool their children to access the benefits of the public education system that they find advantageous, in this case, covering the cost of AP exams. More troubling, it passes both financial and administrative costs onto OSSI and DCPS. If council moves forward with exempting homeschool families' exam fees despite our testimony, then dedicated funds should be allocated to pay for all district students' AP exam fees. Further, this bill also creates equity concerns. As written, the legislation requires DCPS to administer the AP exam at what would be the homeschool students' by right school should they attend it. It does not create the flexibility for instances that the by right school does not offer the AP course or exam, or DCPS might not offer the course or exam writ large. AP courses are offered based on student interest and available staff, and no school in the district offers all 38 exams. For example, if a homeschool student living within Roosevelt High School's boundary wants to take the Japanese language and culture AP exam, this legislation mandates that DCPS offer the exam to this student despite not being offered to all Roosevelt students. OSSI supports providing opportunities for homeschool students to take regularly offered AP exams, but does not support obligating DCPS by right schools to offer every AP exam to homeschool students. In addition, while OSSI can certify homeschool students and verify requests for AP exams, it does not make sense for OSSI to determine the income status of the homeschool students. When a student is enrolled, a public school receives information on the income status of the child. We collect this information for many purposes, for example, the school lunch program, or for the purposes of implementing the uniform per student funding formula. Yet this information is not provided for homeschool families because it is not information that OSSI or a public school would use for any purpose. Adding such a requirement for the purposes of this bill is not advisable. Setting up an income collection and verification system for such a small group of students would be an oversized administrative lift. In summary, we support providing homeschool students opportunities to take AP exams already offered by DCPS. However, OSSI should not be responsible for covering the cost of the exam, nor for determining whether a student qualifies as low income according to College Board's definition. Thank you for inviting me to speak on this issue today. I welcome the opportunity to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Thank you, both of you. We'll have maybe just one 10-minute round for questions. Ms. Navarro, the essence of your testimony is that DCPS already does this in terms of the transcripts, access to transcripts, so that legislation is not necessary. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct, Chairman.
Is there anything in the DC code or the municipal regulations that speaks to access to transcripts?
I would have to get back to you on a thorough reading of the DC regulations, but what I'm speaking to is the agency policies that we have within, the practices that we ensure students are receiving that consistent access to their educational records, as I described in my testimony, both the unofficial records, which they're able to receive on a daily basis through our student information system, as well as their requests for official records going to post-secondary institutions.
I did want to press you. Why does it take so long to obtain a transcript? As I heard your testimony, it sounds like DCPS has to actually create a document. And I would think that that document should already exist, or it should be creatable by the press of a button.
Absolutely. Thank you for that great clarifying question, Chairman. So when we talk about educational records writ large, which is what this legislation does do, we are talking about much more than just transcripts. So we're talking about special education records, historical records, and those are records that, like I mentioned in my testimony, they may need to be redacted, they may need to be located. Some of those records may or may not be digitized, so they may need to be physically located within a school building, for example. When we're talking about transcripts for currently enrolled students, that is a much more straightforward process, and that is much more of a push of the button, like you mentioned, Chairman. And we send transcripts to colleges and universities with that push of a button on a very regular basis. Just to give you a little data snapshot, in school year 21-22, for example, we had more than 21,000 student applications to post-secondary institutions. And for all of those applications, our school counselors are automatically uploading those transcripts to be included within that application packet in a student information system we call it called Naviance. And so while the 45 days is established under FERPA for the rationale that I spoke about, that is much less necessary for something like a student transcript of a current student that is straightforward to pull. And we ensure that our students have those documents in the timeline that they need them to be successful with their post-secondary endeavors.
Can you tell me the average time for producing a transcript?
I don't have the data on an average time for producing a transcript. Like I mentioned, more than 21,000 of those transcripts were populated by school counselors within our information system. I'm not aware of any instances in which a student requested a transcript that was not able to be provided in a for a college application, for example. So if there are any instances that the council is hearing about where students are requesting records by a certain deadline, especially for post-secondary applications, and those are not being fulfilled within that deadline, I would be happy to look into those, but I'm not aware of any of those circumstances currently.
Give me just a second here. I was pausing because I meet monthly or every other month with the state board and the student advocate. And we've been hearing complaints about it taking a long time to get transcripts.
I appreciate that, Chairman. And let me address that as well. So the process that I just described for our current students is much more straightforward. We have really solid information systems. In 2022, we make sure that records are maintained. And so it is a much more straightforward pull. When we receive records requests from constituents that may involve records that are from 50 or 70 years ago, sometimes those records do take longer to locate. So there are a couple things that may happen with those records in particular. I mentioned that they, many of them are not yet digitized, and so they may need to be physically located. We also, when constituents have experienced name changes throughout the course of their life, that's another issue that we need to make sure that we have the correct name so we can do a search with the name that was the name of the student while they were enrolled with DCPS. So there are a number of different issues that may result in a longer search time for particular records. And those are more customary, like I said, for constituents who are alumni of DCPS who are requesting historical records.
So if there's a record request from, let's say, 1996, that would not be push of a button.
That would not necessarily be the push of a button. We are always working to improve our systems to make it more efficient to be able to locate those records for constituents. But there may be, depending on a number of factors, if that school is open or closed and where that record is located, it could be a little bit more lengthy to locate it and make sure that it's fully accurate before producing it and providing it to the constituent.
Chairman, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Testimony that we received earlier, Ward 5 resident attended a high school in DC, faced a different challenge after graduating in 2016. He was unfortunately incarcerated for 18 months. After being released in 2017, he attempted to retrieve his transcripts and other documents necessary to pursue new opportunities. It took multiple attempts to contact the school administration just for them to reach a dead end. The administrators informed him that they could not locate his transcript. Now that's only 5 years ago.
Yes, Chairman, I'm not actually familiar with which student or whether that was a DC public school, but would be really happy to look into that instance in particular. It's not something that was brought to my attention or I'm familiar with, but if there's any way I can be of assistance in that, or any students, forthcoming, if you have a student name you'd like to provide, whether that's on the record or off the record, I would be happy to.
Well, we can send you, this was Kyle Meyer's testimony. So I appreciate what you were saying about, well, you can push a button with the records today, transcripts today, because it's all, you have that digitalized. But 2016 is not that long ago, and the testimony here is 2016. He graduated in 2016. So we can send you the statement, but it would seem to undercut your testimony. So if you could look at this and explain to me why it is that on the one hand, a push of the button does the trick, and on the other hand, here's somebody for whom a push of the button, in fact, the testimony here is the administrators informed him that they could not locate his transcript.
Yeah, and that, like I said, please do follow up with the information of the name of that student, and I would be more than happy to look into what happened there. Our records from 2016 should permit us to very quickly provide a transcript to a student. So I would be happy to investigate what happened and get back to you.
Okay, I'm going to have some questions for Dr. Mitchell, but I'm near the end of my time. So Councilmember Henderson, are you here?
Hi, Mr. Chairman, I am here.
Okay, should be on gallery view. Why don't you proceed?
Thank you. And good afternoon, Dr. Mitchell and Ms. Navarro. Ms. Navarro, I'll actually start with you. So while I can appreciate your testimony that you're here representing DC Public Schools, DCPS is not the only local education agency in the district. And given that we have, I don't know, 62, 60, more than one, while I appreciate that you guys have, these practices in place, I feel like having this law provides a standard across all local education agencies. And so sometimes we have to pursue in those particular cases. So yeah, but while you're here, I do have some questions for you. So I guess piggybacking off of a little bit of what the chairman talked about. So I spent some time on some of the high school websites, kind of looking at what they have in terms of policies and procedures. And as you said, around with Naviance, okay, it sounds very closely like Navient, which is the student loan provider that's got some shadiness behind it, but two different companies. For everyone, it says like you have to provide at least 30 days. Is that about standard in terms of what it takes for you all to process transcript requests for current students?
So we have knowledge of sort of what the deadlines are for college applications. So the use of our Naviance system really kind of allows us to streamline that process and allows our school counselors to have the visibility and the foresight to know that those requests are forthcoming and to make sure those requests are met by the deadline.
Okay.
So it's, yeah.
Okay, so in terms of that practice with you all sending those records, part of the legislation that you mentioned was talking about having gender markers that match the gender identity. For DCPS, when you send an official transcript to a school, what does it look like in terms of the notation that you might make on the transcript if someone hasn't gone through the legal process of changing their name, et cetera?
Yeah, so there's no gender marker on a transcript. And in terms of the name that would appear on the transcript, it would be that legal name. And as I mentioned, our practices are, we ensure that our students are called by their preferred names. So we, within the school building, within their courses, we would make sure that a student is, their gender identity is affirmed and their preferred name is affirmed. But what appears on their official transcript is going to be their legal name.
Okay. Okay. I could see how for a young person that could get a little bit dicey from the perspective of if you're applying to an institution, there's a lot to unpack there. Okay. But what you're saying is legally you are unable to change the official transcript without documentation to change the name.
Correct. So if we have that documentation, such as a court order, then that's what allows us to change the official name, which would appear on the transcript. But that preferred name is going to be used as we address the student and make sure that they feel fully comfortable in their environment.
Okay. What's your response to some of the amendments that were proposed by Black Swan Academy, in particular around expanding access to transcript and academic records to any age of a young person? Is that already practice, or is it only high school students who have access to that in Aspen?
Yeah, so we're really proud of the access that we provide to our students. I mentioned the guide to graduation, career, and college. That's something that our students get actually starting in the 8th grade and then all throughout high school. They have those letter of understanding conversations. We do not restrict access at any age to any student or students' educational records.
Okay. What about the decisions around transfers, enrollments, and other institutional processes? How does that work?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question, council member. Those are decisions that are held by the parental rights. So we do require that parents make enrollment decisions, and those are the holders of those rights in terms of where the student may transfer to or where the student may enroll in school.
Okay, so what happens in those instances where you have a young person who, you know, their school institution believes, okay, this environment is not the best. You reach out to the family and the family is not responsive. What are the other recourse avenues that you as an LEA feel like you can take without having an affirmative consent from a parent?
Yeah, I mean, we would make every effort to contact that student's legal guardian or parent and work with the student to figure out the best way to get in touch with whomever we need to get in touch with in order to make that decision. But we do not have a mechanism for students under the age of 18 to make that decision without consent from a parent or guardian. So
do you think that you should have that type of mechanism?
I think that would put the agency in a position to have decision-making that's not really appropriate for DC public schools in terms of making a value judgment on whether a parent is involved or is involved enough. And so I think we're comfortable that, you know, we need to make sure that we engage parents and get parental consent for decisions such as enrollment and transfers.
Okay. I want to ask some questions about the access to AP exams because I was here and it was a bill. For the record, I guess, Dr. Mitchell, right now, who pays for the cost of the exams? Is it the LEA or the families?
Right now, the cost of AP exams are kind of split. DCPS pays for students who do not meet the deduction, the requirement that College Board has for low income.
Okay.
And she picks up the low income. So currently parents are not paying anything for AP exams, at least not for DCPS parents.
Okay. And for administrative purposes, how far in advance must an LEA order the test? Is that the right terminology?
Yes, that date is actually set by College Board.
So it's a moving target.
It does change, yes. In the past, it's been November 15th as the deadline, and then with exceptions for homeschool students all the way up until March 15th. But again, that's a College Board decision and it could change.
Okay. I think the legislation would require, well, no. I think Ms. Navarro suggested a amendment that would require OSCE to certify that the student is eligible to take the exam. Because one of the things that I was sort of thinking about was like, not that this would happen, but it could. So let's take it, you know, a parent goes on to the website of College Board is like, oh, I think my kid can knock AP US history out of the park. Student never took the AP US history course, and now we're paying for an exam or making accommodations for young persons to take an exam for which they are not, we don't believe that they are equipped to handle because they haven't demonstrated the academic course material. we wouldn't foresee a scenario in that, correct?
Well, I think that is a possibility. We would hope that that doesn't happen. And we know that AP has changed its procedures such that students have to be enrolled in a course in order to take the exam. And so it would be a huge anomaly for a student who has not taken an AP course to actually even be enrolled and therefore eligible to take an AP exam.
Okay. Administratively, though, do you feel like your division could properly certify that someone is eligible or has completed the necessary prerequisites to take the exam?
Right. Well, my understanding of certify was simply to indicate that the student is indeed enrolled as a homeschool student. Beyond that, OSSI doesn't really have the capacity to determine whether or not a student has actually taken the course or whether or not a student is otherwise eligible.
Okay, Ms. Navarro, any you wanted to add, might you want to clarify there in terms of what you meant by certify?
That's absolutely correct, what Dr. Mitchell said. We as DCPS actually don't have visibility on which students have been authorized for the homeschool program. And so we would need to rely on OSSI to let us know that, yes, this is a DC student who has been authorized for the homeschool program.
Right, but authorized for the homeschool program, but not, who checks then to ensure that you did the prerequisite?
We don't have a mechanism, I think what Dr. Mitchell and I are both saying.
Okay, so now we're unpacking here what we're talking about is that given the nature of a homeschool student, you don't have access into their records to be able to determine, okay, did you actually enroll in X class, et cetera. But clearly other jurisdictions have figured this out. Yes? So
yeah, we know that other jurisdictions have put forth rules that enable homeschool students to take AP exams. But we don't know, at least I don't know the extent to which other jurisdictions check to ensure that the student has actually taken an AP. In order to register for the exam, the AP coordinator has to create a separate course to say that the student has taken, the student is enrolled in a course, but whether or not the student has actually done the work, I just don't know.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you giving me just a few little minutes here because I don't have a full additional round of questions. But I do want to say, I think Dr. Mitchell, you brought up an interesting point from an equity standpoint of a student who lives in the Roosevelt boundary wants to take an AP exam that is actually not offered at that institution. And so what does that mean in terms of, right? Because it's not like you can take the AP exam at home. So that homeschool student would have to come to Roosevelt to sit in a class by themselves because other students wouldn't be taking that particular AP exam to take that examination. Someone from Roosevelt would have to proctor that exam. Well, there are layers here.
Yes, there are layers, council member. So we concur and agree very much with DCPS's request for an amendment to the legislation that would give DCPS the option if the course and the exam is not offered at the by right school, that DCPS could then make accommodations at another location. But that is only if the course is offered within DCPS. There are some courses and some exams that are not offered within DCPS, and we don't think it's fair for DCPS then. I don't even think it's possible for DCPS to enroll a student in a course that's not being offered by DCPS. So that's the difference there.
Okay, what about other charter LEAs?
Well, we know that there are 38 different AP exams. Within the city, there are 35 exams. But certainly if a parent can use the College Board ledger to determine where it is, but the bill specifically talks about DCPS.
Okay. And Ms. Navarro, how many AP courses do you offer within DCPS? 35 your total, or is 35 citywide?
I can reference some data for you, but what I can tell you off the top of my head is that we offer AP courses at all of our high schools, with the exception of Bard, because they are an early college high school. And then I believe we have limited offerings at Eastern High School because they're international baccalaureate. So they're anywhere, I believe, between 6, and I can get more specific data and follow up with you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think you're making a really good point. I'm thinking about the fact of like, so College Board just is piloting a AP African American Studies. To my knowledge, only one LEA in DC currently offers that, and it's not DCPS. So if somebody were like, there are lots of layers here. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any further questions.
So let me struggle with this issue of the AP legislation. I read the bill as being somewhat ambiguous about what it means that OSCE would certify the person as eligible. And I think it could be as simple as that, well, they're homeschooled. Is there a problem with a student, other than the fee, put aside the fee, is there a problem with a student who's being homeschooled taking an AP exam at a school where it's being offered, even if they haven't received the adequate, sufficient education?
We agree with the spirit of the bill and think that we want to provide as much access to all residents to take AP exams when the exams are offered within the schools or within a location where DCPS is offering the exam. So there's no problem giving access to homeschool students.
And it's true that the bill focuses on DCPS. We could always modify the bill to say LEAs. So, but actually, let me go here. How many students are we talking about?
So currently there are 160 who are homeschooled that are on the homeschool register. We know that on average, students take 2 AP exams. So we're talking about the possibility of 160 students taking 2 exams apiece.
What do you mean on average students take 2 exams? If you take all the students to 95,000 students, well, we're talking about.
No, of those students that take AP exams, on average, they take 2. Some students may take 5, some students may take 1, but on average it's 2 exams.
Okay, but the 160 who are on the register, is that 160 seniors or 160 total?
That's 160 total high school students.
So that could be grade 9. I obviously that's absurd, but it could be 160 in grade 9.
It could be. I doubt it, but it could be.
Okay. And AP can be taken at any grade in high school?
I believe that is the case, yes.
Okay, so if the 160 choose to take an AP exam, the average would be 2 exams.
That's correct, sir.
But you don't know how many homeschool students take AP exams?
No, we don't at this point.
So at any rate, the universe is 160 students.
That's correct.
Who are in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the sense I get, Dr. Mitchell, is that OSCE's greatest concern has to do with the fees. So if we took the fee part out of the bill, pretty much you would be okay with the bill, although you liked what the DCPS suggested in their testimony, which is that, and I'll change it from DCPS to LEA, that the LEA would provide the test where it's being offered, if it's being offered.
That is correct, sir. if the fee portion of the bill were taken out and it was just about giving homeschool students access to the exams that DCPS offered, we would have no problems.
I'm going to come back to the fee in a moment, but I think the genesis for this legislation might have come from what Ms. Dooley testified to. She said, last year my daughter needed to be registered for 2 different AP exams, both of which were offered at our local in Boundary High School, Jackson Reed. We reached out to the AP coordinator. The AP coordinator was happy to accommodate my daughter, but DCPS would not allow it. DCPS said that the cost of the AP exams are covered centrally for DCPS students, and there was no mechanism to collect payment from homeschooled families. So that seems to be the rub. Ms. Navarro?
Yes, Chairman, that's correct. We don't have the authority to, or the mechanism.
You know, you just froze mid-sentence.
Yes. So Chairman, while
families and be able to apply.
Ms. Navarro, I think you're back.
And
You
I'm sorry.
froze. You don't realize you froze. So can you start over?
Okay, sorry about that. Yes, we don't have the authority or ability or mechanism created to take fees directly from parents and apply them to the AP fee. So as mentioned, we pay for the AP fees centrally for our DCPS enrolled students, but we don't have the authority or mechanism for a structure set up to, I think like Councilmember Henderson mentioned, they can't just cut a check to the school because they're centrally paid for. So that would be a process we would need to work together to figure out, should we move forward with allowing this access?
Well, that can't be so difficult. I can't believe that with 50,000 students and currently and a century of existence, maybe, that there hasn't been a time when a parent's written a check to DCPS.
Yes, so certainly that happens at the school level, like I mentioned, Chairman, for things like graduation fees. But what we're talking about here is the implementation of an examination that's covered centrally. So it requires a different mechanism.
Okay. All right, I'm struggling with that because we're not talking about a lot of money here. So maybe DCPS could give some thought here. I mean, like athletic fees, are they paid centrally or are they paid to the school?
Yeah, I'd be happy to follow up and do a deeper dive with the folks who work on our finance side to identify exactly what would be necessary should the council be interested in going that route.
Well, I think the council's interested in exploring that route, so.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to
We
follow
need
up.
you to follow that up. So Dr. Mitchell, the fee waiver comes from OSSI.
So when the AP coordinator registers a student for the exam, the AP coordinator also indicates whether or not that student is from a low-income background. If the student is from a low-income background, then College Board then bills OSSI for that student's AP exam. So in addition to the discount that College Board gives a $35 discount for low-income students. Again, the AP coordinator indicates that the student is eligible for that discount, sends the registration to College Board, and then College Board bills OSSI, and OSSI pays the fee at a reduced rate for low-income students.
So why can't we do that for homeschool?
Well, OSSI believes that funding that is for public education should not be expended for homeschool students. In addition, homeschool students, when families decide to homeschool their students, they make a choice to be responsible for the education of their students. And that choice includes paying for curricula, for books, as well as for AP fees.
But this could be argued as an equity issue. So you've got a upper income, I hate to put it in terms of wards, but I'll just illustrate it that way. So you've got a Ward 3 parent willing to pay. I think the way the bill's introduced, maybe the fees are waived, but we don't have to do that. They're willing to pay. That certainly was Ms. Dooley's testimony. So they're not part of this discussion. And then you've got again, I'm just saying this for illustrative purposes, a Ward 8 parent. And the parent's really pushing for their kid to be academically successful, but doesn't have a lot of money. If we say, well, tough, you decided to go homeschool, you're going to have to pay for this. I think that could be argued through an equity lens as not being the best policy. So just seizing on that parent, isn't there some mechanism where they could apply for some or all of the fee to be absorbed? So you're saying they can go through the college board. That requires the AP coordinator to say that they're, and I'm not clear, can the AP coordinator do that with regard to the homeschool?
The AP coordinator can and does indicate for students who are enrolled in public schools, whether or not the student is from a low-income background. For homeschool students currently, we don't have that information in the system. I think that you're quite right. It does pose an equity issue for the parent who can't afford to pay the fees. I think, though, that we have to weigh that against a few things. One, does this set a precedent if we start funding AP test fees for homeschool students? Are there other benefits that public school students receive that AP parents might then expect? I also think that the administrative burden of having to set up a system in order to do that, especially for OSSI to do that, may outweigh the benefits, because as you've indicated, we're talking about a small number of students.
Well, what if we just rely on the AP coordinator to sort of figure it out and ask some questions and not do a rigorous documentation? So the AP coordinator says, Joey's from a low income family and therefore ought to get the college board discount. Okay, so I'm not really clear. The homeschooler can't, that doesn't get billed to the college board, and the college board doesn't bill that to OSSI because they're homeschooled?
Well, we don't have that process in place. So
that's what I'm asking.
So currently, so College Board has recently changed its process. In years prior, homeschool students could easily take exams that were offered at public schools. But with the digitization of the process, now there's a one-on-one link, and it makes it much more difficult for homeschool students to gain access to the test. And currently, if a student is homeschooled, we don't have that information. And so I don't believe that there are any homeschool students that are accessing the discounted rate at this point.
Give me a second here. I think I'll leave it at that with the questions. Ms. Navarro, you're going to get back to us on a couple of things, if I remember correctly.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay. That's going to then conclude this hearing. I'm going to, after I bang the gavel, I'm going to take probably about 15 minutes and then start the next hearing, which means probably about 1:35 or 1:40. Let me just kind of close this out. This has been a hearing on two bills. Bill 24-232, Student and Minor Access to Records and Transcripts Act, and Bill 24-665, Access to Advanced Placement Exams Amendment Act. As I indicated at the beginning, the record in this matter will close in 2 weeks. That's Tuesday, 5 p.m. on Tuesday, October 11th, 2022. I want to thank all of the witnesses for their testimony. The time is now 1:21 p.m.